Chapter 2 Ancient Beliefs about Doomsday. It's an undeniable facet of human nature that we somehow feel more secure if we know the end of a story, especially when it's our story. We don't like loose threads. We don't like unanswered questions or unsolved mysteries or uncertainty. We don't like not knowing what's waiting for us around the corner and, if it might hurt us, what we can do to avoid it or prepare for it. It's the inherent belief of humankind that forewarned is forearmed. And we've held that belief for as long as humankind has existed on Earth. Ancient civilizations were every bit as determined as we are to piece together the puzzle of the end of our story on this Earth, and the story of this Earth itself. They used the same tools we use today to figure it out. Some combination of their religious beliefs, their bodies of experience, and the information they had at hand. Their doomsday scenarios ranged from the optimistic to the truly depressing, again, no different from our current sophisticated, educated theories except for the vocabularies and details. But when it's all said and done, they were as earnest as we are to come up with the truth about what may be the first question ever asked on this planet: how does our story end? The Incas. The Inca Empire of South America was once the largest nations on Earth, sprawling 2,500 miles along the Andes mountain range. The origins of the Incan civilization are cloaked in myth and mystery, preserved mostly through the spoken word from one generation to the next when their recorded history was destroyed, and their vast wealth pirated, by Spanish conquistadors in 1532. The earliest Inca were artisans, hunters, farmers, and indisputably brilliant builders and engineers. Before the invention of the wheel, they built 14,000 miles of roads intended for nothing but foot travel, and there was such integrity to the roads' construction that some of them are still intact today. Probably the most extraordinary monuments to the architectural genius of this ancient society are the Incan pyramids, temples, observatories, and other structures that continue to fascinate visitors from all over the world, also still intact, impeccably designed, and, in many cases, incomplete, mute reminders of a civilization suddenly decimated for the sake of power and greed. The heart of Incan lives, language, and religion was their sense of oneness with nature. Nature, they believed, was the handiwork of the sun god, of whom they considered themselves to be direct descendants. With elaborate festivals they thanked the sun god for their harvests, they prayed to the sun god for bountiful crops, and they implored the sun god not to leave them, his children, during solstices when the earth and the sun are farthest from each other. They believed in reincarnation and, when the holiest of rituals were being held, carried mummies of their ancestors to the ritual sites so they could share their most reverent moments with those who preceded them. When the Incan civilization was destroyed by the Spanish invasion in the 1500s, a small tribe of refugees known as the Cuero escaped to isolated villages in the high Andes. They live there to this day, with their elders and shamans teaching their ancient language, history, traditions, and prophecies to generation after generation of heirs to the once vast and brilliant Incan world. In 1996, a Cuero tribal leader, a revered shaman, and other tribal elders honored the United States with a historic visit in which they shared a wealth of information about the Inca, including the prophecies of their ancestors. Among those prophecies is an eloquent passage describing the Incan beliefs about the end of the world. The new caretakers of the earth will come from the west, and those that have made the greatest impact on Mother Earth now have the moral responsibility to remake their relationship with her, after remaking themselves. The prophecy holds that North America will supply the physical strength, or body, Europe will supply the mental aspect, or head, and the heart will be supplied by South America. The prophecies are optimistic. They refer to the end of time as we know it, the death of a way of thinking and a way of being, the end of a way of relating to nature and to the earth. In the coming years, the Incas expect us to emerge into a golden age, a golden millennium of peace. The prophecies also speak of tumultuous changes happening in the earth, and in our psyche, redefining our relationships and spirituality. The next Pachacuti, or Great Change, has already begun, and it promises the emergence of a new human after this period of turmoil. As if to guide their listeners toward this prophesied golden age, the Cuero added the following in parting: follow your own footsteps. Learn from the rivers, the trees, and the rocks. Honor the Christ, the Buddha, your brothers and sisters. Honor your Earth Mother and the Great Spirit. Honor yourself and all of creation. Look with the eyes of your soul and engage the essential. The Mayan civilization is thought to have been born in the Yucatan Peninsula in about 2600 BC and thrived through approximately AD 1300. They excelled brilliantly in astronomy, hieroglyphic writing, science, mathematics, art, farming, weaving, architecture, and creating highly technical, intricate calendar systems, to name only a handful of their gifts. Their society was formed around a hierarchy of class distinctions, with kings and priests of clearly defined territories as their ruling class and a vast peasant population as the lowest class providing slave labor, and the Maya ultimately spread throughout what is now Mexico, El Salvador, Belize, Honduras, and Guatemala. Almost as fascinating as the Mayan civilization itself is the mysterious abruptness with which it vanished. It was as if a complex, sophisticated society of 15 million people simply walked away from their lives one day and never came back, leaving nothing but deserted cities and abandoned architectural masterpieces in their wake. To this day there are no definitive answers but many theories about what happened so suddenly and with such finality. Some believe a series of droughts forced the population into a choice between relocating or starving to death. Some believe a revolt of the peasants/slaves left a handful of nobility to work the land with no experience or expertise, and as a result the society essentially imploded from its inability to support itself. Some believe that the overzealous agricultural pursuits of the Maya led to everything from severely depleted soil to an ultimately destructive slash-and-burn approach to clearing the rich Central American forests for farmland, so that this civilization literally robbed their land of its ability to sustain them. Some believe deadly viruses destroyed the Maya, while others believe that overpopulation was to blame. Again, the only thing about the vanishing of the Maya that experts seem to agree on is that no one knows with any certainty what really happened to those 15 million people around AD 1300. And, because the Spanish conquistadors made it their practice to kill the Mayan priests and nobility and to burn Mayan books and records when they invaded Central and South America, it's likely that no one ever will. What has survived after all these centuries is the fascinating and very complicated Mayan calendar, which consisted of cycles of 260 days, each day having one of 20 names represented by its own symbol. The days of the Mayan calendar were numbered 1 through 13, but since there are 20 names, after a 13-day period was finished, the next day was numbered 1 again. The calendar also kept track of a solar year in which the months were named, and following the 18 months of their solar year, they included a 5-day month in which the days were thought to be unlucky and, as a result, were not given names. I won't pretend to be able to decipher the intricacies of the Mayan calendar. Instead, I'll focus on an element of it that everyone can decipher. It ends on December 21, 2012, which has been a source of concern for those who are aware of it and are determined to find specific doomsday predictions to be fearful of. But the Mayan culture never intended to imply that a cataclysmic end of the world would be happening on December 21, 12, or the winter solstice of 2012. Their prophecy is that on that date the world will be making a transition from one age into another, and it is humankind's choice whether that transition will involve violently dramatic changes or will simply evolve with graceful, peaceful tranquility. Every 5,125 years, the Maya say, one cycle on Earth ends and another begins. There are 5 cycles, each of them with characteristics roughly corresponding to our passage through a 24-hour day. The first of Earth's cycles is comparable to a galactic morning, when our solar system is just approaching the central light of the universe. The second cycle, midday, is our solar system's closest proximity to the universal central light. The galactic afternoon, or third cycle, occurs as our solar system begins moving away from the central light. The fourth cycle corresponds to the night, when our solar system is at its farthest from the central light. And the fifth cycle is that darkest before the dawn period, as our solar system pulls away from being devoid of light and moves toward its first cycle of morning again. The prophecy of the Mayan calendar is that our solar system was slowly ending its fifth cycle, its darkest before the dawn, in 1987, moving toward the morning of the first cycle that will officially arrive in 2012. And how we use the brief years between now and then will determine whether the impending birth of the morning is destructive or productive. Negativity, violence, greed, cruelty, the lust for power, and the systematic desecration of nature and its sacred inhabitants will guarantee a catastrophic transition from the fifth cycle back to the first, while a global nurturing of kindness, respect, unity, charity, and a celebration of the sanctity of our natural planet and all its living creatures can, by our choice, create a cyclical transition into a truly golden age. So 2012, the Maya promise, will mark a profound change among us on Earth. What kind of change it will be is entirely up to us. Atlantis, according to the Maya, the end of the fourth world cycle, and the beginning of the fifth occurred on August 12, 3113 BC, with the sinking of the great continent Atlantis. Atlantis was first referred to in literature by the brilliant Greek writer and philosopher Plato, 428 to 348 BC. His dialogues Timaeus and Critias include characters who refer to Atlantis as a place somewhere outside the Pillars of Hercules that was destroyed by a tsunami or an earthquake about 9,000 years earlier. According to the dialogues, Socrates had been talking about ideal societies, in response to which both Timaeus and Critias tell Socrates a story that is not a fiction but a true story, about a conflict between the ancient Athenians and the Atlanteans. Literally, since Plato, the Atlanteans, their origins, and their civilization have been the subject of exhaustive legend, research, and exploration. A variety of sources are convinced that they were extraterrestrials who came to Earth more than 50,000 years ago. They were of human shape, fair-skinned, and were giants, averaging from 7 to 10 feet tall. Excavations have unearthed skeletons that confirm the existence of a race that grew to and exceeded that height. The lifespan of the Atlanteans was said to be about 800 years, which might explain how they had time to develop their astonishing technology, light years beyond ours even today. They were able to achieve perfect control of the weather. And because they were virtually addicted to stimulation, they took particular delight in conjuring violent storms for their amusement. They could also create geological special effects, from volcanic fountains to geysers to mineral venting, and, possibly most breathtaking of all, they invented something called threshold technology, a device that converted what we think of as the time-space continuum into a source of energy. One of the most common sources of energy on Atlantis, though, was the crystal, which we know has the ability to both transfer and amplify a beam of light directed at its facets. The Atlanteans simply expanded on that premise, using crystal energy not only for basic energy needs similar to ours but also to enhance their crops, their own physical development, their mental capacity, and their youthful appearance despite their dramatically advanced ages. Atlantis held a great fascination for the brilliant psychic and prophet Edgar Cayce, whom we'll discuss at length in a later chapter. In one of his many detailed descriptions of life on Atlantis, he referred to a tuea stone, or firestone, a great crystal that was housed in a building with a retractable roof so that it could be charged by the sun, moon, stars, general atmosphere, and Earth itself. It was able to transmit energy to power all forms of craft on, above, and below the continent, send audio and video transmissions over vast distances, and wirelessly provide heat and light anywhere they were needed throughout Atlantis. According to Cayce and other scholars, the great crystal that had so blessed the Atlanteans ultimately led to their demise. As they became more obsessed with their own power, and the power of this unprecedented energy source they'd created, they began tuning the crystal to higher and higher frequencies, until it literally caused mountains to implode, volcanoes to erupt, and the continent to fall in on itself and submerge into the Atlantic Ocean. While there won't be unanimous agreement that Atlantis existed until it rises again during this century, and there have certainly been indications that it wasn't as imaginary as skeptics prefer to believe. A 1954 issue of Geologic Society of America Bulletin, for example, reporting on the exploration of the summit of the submerged Mid-Atlantic Ridge, reads, "The state of lithification of the limestone suggests that it may have been lithified under subaerial, i.e., above water, on land surface, conditions, and that the sea mount, summit, may have been an island within the past 12,000 years." And then there was a series of satellite photographs shown and described in the March 1996 issue of Discover magazine. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge snakes down the center of that ocean off Greenland to the latitude of Cape Horn. Under South Africa, the southwest Indian Ridge shoots into the Indian Ocean like a fizzling rocket, or perhaps like the trail of some giant and cartoonish deep-sea mole. But maybe the Maya gave the existence of Atlantis all the confirmation it will ever need by considering its demise so historically monumental that, in their most sacred beliefs, it ended a world. The Aztecs, another powerful and now extinct civilization of warriors, was the Aztec Empire, centered in the Valley of Mexico beginning in approximately the 12th century AD. Their early history wasn't committed to paper but was passed along from one generation to the next through word of mouth, so there's no way of tracing their inception with any great accuracy. Legend suggests that the Aztecs came from the island of Aztlan. But there is speculation about whether or not Aztlan is a place that actually existed. It is as shrouded in myth and mystery as Camelot and, some would say, the lost continent of Atlantis. And further speculation suggests that Aztlan was very real and that it was located in Utah, or perhaps Colorado. If that were proven to be true, it would mean that the Aztecs may have arrived in the Valley of Mexico from what is now the western United States, and the whole notion of undocumented immigrants from south of the border might have to be rethought. They might have a case that they're descendants of Native Americans who are even more entitled to be here than the rest of us. The Aztec migration scrolls describe Aztlan as an island in a lake, inhabited by great flocks of herons, with 7 temples in the center of the island. Some say the 7 caves of Utah's Antelope Island might confirm its identity as the ancient Aztlan, while others are convinced Aztlan will ultimately be found in or near Florida. But Jesus Yoregi of the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico states without equivocation, Aztlan is a mythical place, not a historical one. So the debate and occasional search expeditions continue. What's not in doubt is that the Aztecs were led into the Valley of Mexico in the 14th century by Tenoch, their chieftain. He was subsequently ordered by the war god Huitzilopochtli to take his uncivilized, barbaric people to the refuge of a marshy island in Lake Texcoco, where they were to build a city and honor Huitzilopochtli with human sacrifices, a practice not uncommon among the Aztecs. Tenoch's city was built under these swampy, difficult conditions, and it was called Tenochtitlan. From those harsh beginnings the Aztec Empire took root and thrived until around 1520, when the Spanish conquistadors, led by Cortés, invaded and conquered the Aztecs and virtually every other civilization in their path, destroying every trace of the Aztecs in the process. Like the Maya, the Aztecs developed a very complex calendar system based on astronomy, designed not only to mark their holidays and short periods of time but also to track the cycles of humankind through our progress on Earth. They embraced what they referred to as the legend of the 5 suns, each of which represented periods in their own history. During the life of each sun, the earth thrives in peace, prosperity, and new life. But when a sun dies, the world descends into catastrophic turmoil, with the gods renewing the earth through the process of first destroying it. The first sun was called the Sun of Precious Stones, and it was destroyed by jaguars at the command of Tezcatlipoca, the god of night and god of the north. Because he was believed to carry a magic mirror that emitted smoke and killed his enemies, Tezcatlipoca was also called God of Smoking Mirror. The second sun was known as the Son of Darkness, upon whose death life was destroyed by a massive hurricane that was summoned by Quetzalcoatl, the creator and god of the sky. The third sun, the Son of Fire, and all life it nourished, was exterminated by fire sent by Tezcatlipoca. The fourth sun was the Son of Water, at whose death a huge flood destroyed the world. This flood came from Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility, whom the Aztecs so feared that they sometimes drowned their children as sacrifices to him. According to the Aztec calendar, we're now in the Sun of Movement, presided over by Tonadia, the sun god and the rising eagle, who will ultimately cause earthquakes so cataclysmic that they will split the world in half. Native Americans. It's been said of the true Native Americans for thousands of years, and it's still true today, ask them to tell you their story, and they'll tell you about nature and their reverent relationship with Mother Earth. The origin of Native Americans is a subject of debate, and there's no real consensus among experts about where they came from. Theories range from a prehistoric migration from Asia via the Bering Strait to an escape from the destruction of the lost continent Atlantis. But there's no question that in 1492, when Christopher Columbus arrived by mistake on San Salvador Island, the natives who greeted him, with their brown skin and black hair, convinced him that he'd successfully completed his journey to India. He referred to them as Indios, Spanish for Indians, and the cultural name was born. The many tribes of the Native American nations each have their own histories, languages, rituals, and prophecies. But they all revolve around their spiritual connection to the earth and their belief that the survival of our planet is dependent on humankind's learning to treat all things in nature with nothing short of reverence. The Hopi Prophecies. There's a wonderful story that's been circulating since 1959, and was told in part in a 1963 publication called Book of the Hopi. The story goes that in 1958 a minister named David Young was driving through the stifling heat of the desert when he saw a Native American elder beside the road. The Reverend Young stopped to offer the elder a ride, and the elder silently accepted. The two rode along wordlessly for a few miles, until the elder began to speak. "I am White Feather," he said, "a Hopi of the ancient Bear clan. I have followed the sacred paths of my people, who inhabit the forests and many lakes in the east, the land of ice and long nights in the north, and the places of holy altars of stone built many years ago by my brothers' fathers in the south. I have heard the stories of the past, and the prophecies of the future. Today, many of the prophecies have turned to stories, and few are left. The past grows longer, and the future grows shorter." The Reverend Young listened raptly as the extraordinary man continued, "My people await Pahana, the lost white brother whose return to earth marks the beginning of the fifth world, according to Hopi legend, as do all our brothers in the land. He will not be like the white men we know now, who are cruel and greedy. We were told of their coming long ago. But still we await Pahana. The fourth world shall end soon, and the fifth world will begin. This the elders everywhere know. The signs over many years have been fulfilled, and so few are left. This is the first sign, we are told, of the coming of the white-skinned men, like Pahana, but not living like Pahana men who took the land that was not theirs. And men who struck their enemies with thunder. This is the second sign, our lands will see the coming of spinning wheels filled with voices. In his youth, my father saw this prophecy come true with his eyes, the white men bringing their families in wagons across the prairies. This is the third sign, a strange beast like a buffalo, but with great long horns, will overrun the land in large numbers. These White Feather saw with his eyes the coming of the white men's cattle. This is the fourth sign, the land will be crossed by snakes of iron. This is the fifth sign, the land shall be crisscrossed by a giant spider's web. This is the sixth sign, the land shall be crisscrossed with rivers of stone that make pictures in the sun. This is the seventh sign, you will hear of the sea turning black, and many living things dying because of it. This is the eighth sign, you will hear of many youth, who wear their hair long like my people, come and join the tribal nations to learn their ways and wisdom. This is the ninth and last sign, you will hear of a dwelling place in the heavens, above the earth, that shall fall with a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. Very soon after this, the ceremonies of my people will cease. These are the signs that great destruction is coming. The world shall rock to and fro. The white man will battle against other people in other lands with those who possessed the first light of wisdom. There will be many columns of smoke and fire such as White Feather has seen the white man make in the deserts not far from here. Only those which come will cause disease and a great dying. Many of my people, understanding the prophecies, shall be safe. Those who stay and live in the places of my people also shall be safe. Then there will much to rebuild. And soon, very soon afterward, Pahana will return. He shall bring with him the dawn of the fifth world. He shall plant the seeds of his wisdom in their hearts. Even now the seeds are being planted. These shall smooth the way to the emergence into the fifth world. The Reverend Young and White Feather the elder never saw each other again after they parted ways that day, but the extraordinary experience and the prophecies that emerged from it have become a part of the modern Hopi legends. And according to most interpreters, the signs White Feather prophesied are imagery of the following. The first sign, thunder, is a reference to guns. The second sign, an obvious reference to the arrival of settlers in covered wagons. The third sign, strange beast like a buffalo but with great long horns, is a reference to the proliferation of longhorn cattle in the newly settled southwest and west. The fourth sign, snakes of iron, is a reference to railroad tracks. The fifth sign, a giant spider's web, is a reference to power lines. The sixth sign, rivers of stone are concrete highways, and pictures in the sun are very likely the mirages created by the hot sun beating down on the pavement. The seventh sign, the sea turning black, is a reference to the destructive rash of oil spills. The eighth sign, youth who wear their hair long and join the tribal nations to learn their ways and wisdom, is a reference to the hippie movement of the late 1960s and early 1970s, and the hippies' interest in both Native American and Indians and their cultures. The ninth sign, a dwelling place above the earth that shall fall with a great crash, is a reference to the 1979 disaster of the space station Skylab plummeting to Earth. The Navajo End-of-Days. The wonderful Navajo writer Ray Baldwin Lewis beautifully described his people's prophecies and beliefs in a short story called When All Things Come to an End. It reads, in part, the birds will all settle to the ground, the badger will grow horns, the wind will blow without ceasing, the people will intermarry with other tribes as well as within clans, there will be voices, but they will be too weak for many to hear, the enemy will penetrate the stronghold of the people, the Navajo. And this will be when all things come to an end, when all generations come to meet. But first, 4 major events will occur. A mule will give birth of its own kind, a baby with white hair and with teeth will be born speaking, there will be a famine and many will suffer, lightning will whip across the sky from the east to the west. These things will be signs that all things are coming to an end. Old men and women who foresaw the future taught their children to hold on to their traditions and not forsake their religion, for the day was coming when they would lose it if they were not careful. I heard the medicine man's prophecy that his medicine bag will no longer have strength as in the past, there will be no regard for it, and it will be thrown away. The people will be lost without its presence, and they will have no power against the enemy. According to interpretations of ancient Navajo chants, the time of the end won't bring the destruction of this planet. Instead, when the Great Spirit returns to Earth, his arrival will mean the dawn of a new day. He will breathe new life into the spirit of the people, all people on Earth will melt into one and love each other, humankind will no longer be threatened or affected by the world's afflictions and perils, and a joyful new religion will spread throughout the planet that is devoid of all the prejudices and arbitrary laws of the previously existing religions that have been passed along through the ages. The Lakota humankind's imperative need to begin cherishing our planet in order to avoid its destruction is beautifully expressed in an excerpt from a Lakota prophecy. It refers to the Star People, whom many tribes believe to be their ancient extraterrestrial ancestors, and to the Sacred Mother, their name for the Earth, the star people that you call meteorites will come to this earth in answer to the mother's call for help. You see, we are all relations. So the star people are beings, and they are the planets, and the other bodies in the heavens as well. The Sacred Mother is screaming for life, and the meteorites will hear her cries and answer her call for help. They will hit the earth from the heavens with such force that many internal things will happen as well as external. The earth will move as a result of the impact. This will cause the sacred fire that is the source of all life to the mother to move through her body. The rains will change their fall and the winds will alter their course, and what has existed for 300 years will no longer exist. And where there is summer, there will be fall. And where there is fall, there will be winter. And where there is winter, there will be spring. The animals and plants will become confused. There will be great plagues that you do not understand. Many of these plagues are born from your scientists whose intentions have gone awry. Your scientists have let these monsters loose upon the land. These plagues will spread through your waters and through your blood and through your food because you have disrupted the natural chain through which your mother cleanses herself. Only those who have learned to live on the land will find sanctuary. Go to where the eagles fly, to where the wolf roams, to where the bear lives. Here you will find life because they will always go to where the water is pure and the air can be breathed. Live where the trees, the lungs of this earth, purify the air. There is a time coming, beyond the weather. The veil between the physical and the spiritual world is thinning. The lower Brule Sioux tribe Brave Buffalo of the Brule Sioux offers an eloquent prophecy about the sanctity of nature and how we're endangering ourselves by compromising it, and about the eternal cycle of life in this universe. It is time for the great purification. We are at a point of no return. The two-legged are about to bring destruction to life on earth. It's happened before, and it's about to happen again. The sacred hoop shows how all things go in a circle. The old becomes new, the new becomes old. Everything repeats. White people have no culture. Culture is having roots in the earth. People without culture don't exist very long because nature is God. Without a connection to nature, the people drift, grow negative, destroy themselves. In the beginning we had one mind, and it was positive, a thing of beauty, seeing beauty everywhere. The Cherokee Prophecies. The Cherokee are an intensely spiritual civilization who believe that each morning humankind should give thanks to the Creator, to Mother Earth, to Father Sky, to all their relatives and to the four sacred directions, the East, guardian of the nourishment and healing that grows from the earth, the South, guardian of the wind, sky and air, the West, guardian of the life-giving element of water, and the North, guardian of fire. To the Cherokee, all things are connected, all things have a purpose, and all things contain the divine spark of life. They believe that when we die, our souls may be selected to keep living as ghosts in the earthly dimension, who can be seen when needed. There is no death, in other words, just an eternal cycle bestowed by our Creator, the Great Spirit. The Cherokee deeply treasure the prophecies of their elders, passed along from one generation to the next in their rich oral tradition by the revered tribal elders. Among those prophecies, a black ribbon would be built across the land, and a bug would begin to move across the ribbon, a sign that very soon the earth would shake so violently that the bug would be thrown into the air and begin to fly. The black ribbon is thought to be the first roadways, and the bug moving across it is thought to be the first automobile, mass-produced for the first time in 1908. Soon after, the violent shaking of the earth, the First World War, threw the bug into the air, i.e., initiated the widespread usage of the airplane. A cobweb would be built across the world through which people would talk. A few hundred years after this prophecy, telephone lines reached into virtually every corner of the globe. A sign of life in the east would turn on its side and be surrounded by death, and one day the sun would rise in the west, bringing a second violent shaking of the earth even worse than the first. The cross, a sign of life, was turned on its side to form the Nazi swastika. The symbol of the Japanese Empire was the rising sun, and the earth's violent shaking in the Second World War was indeed even worse than the first. Gourds of ashes would fall from the sky, creating more ash from all living things in their path and preventing new growth for years to come. The atom bomb fit that description perfectly. The eagle would someday fly in the night and land on the moon. In 1969, the safe arrival on the moon of the Apollo 11 spacecraft was announced by astronaut Neil Armstrong to the NASA control room with the simple words, "The Eagle has landed." A house would be built in the east that would welcome all the peoples of the earth, and it would sparkle like the sun reflecting off the desert mica. The United Nations, founded in 1945, moved its original headquarters from San Francisco to a shimmering golden glass monolith in New York City in 1952. If we miss our opportunities after the first two shakings of the earth to come together as a human family of brothers and sisters as we have, the earth will be shaken for a third time, more violently than ever before. At the core of the Cherokee prophecies, though, is the belief that their souls come from the stars in the form of star seeds to be born into the human race and bring light and knowledge, and that those same souls return to the heavens to become stars when they die. In fact, some Cherokee elders teach that all their ancestors were travelers from the legendary star cluster Pleiades, a cluster of stars that form the Eye of the Bull formed by the Taurus constellation. The 6 stars of the Pleiades that are visible to the naked eye are said to be lost boys who, according to Cherokee myth, were severely punished by their mothers for returning home from playing later than their curfew allowed. The 7 boys, deciding their angry mothers must no longer love or want them, ran away from home again, returning to the hills outside the village where they always played. They began to dance in a circle, for hours on end, chanting, "Spirits of our people, take us into the sky so blue. Our mothers no longer want us, and we wish to be with you." Back in the village, the boys' mothers discovered their sons were missing and quickly headed to the hills to retrieve them. They arrived to see the boys dancing and chanting, and suddenly one of the mothers cried out, "Look! They're leaving the ground. If we don't hurry, they'll be gone forever." The boys were dancing above their mothers' heads by the time their frantic mothers reached them. Each mother jumped in panic, trying to grab and hold onto her son, but only one was successful, barely getting a grip on her boy's foot. She pulled him to the ground so hard that a hole formed where he landed and the earth closed around him. She fell to her knees beside him, weeping, and then looked up to see that the other 6 boys were dancing into the clouds and disappearing into the sky. Legend says that every day for the rest of their lives the 7 mothers, who never smiled or laughed again or knew another moment of joy, returned to the spot where they lost their sons. 6 mothers looked to the heavens for their sons, while the 7th knelt to the ground, soaking the earth with her tears. And then one day 6 mothers saw that stars had formed in the sky exactly where their sons had vanished. Those stars, they say, are the Pleiades. The seventh mother looked to the spot where the earth had swallowed up her son and gaped at the tiny pine tree that had begun to grow. To this day the Cherokee consider the pine to be one of their most sacred trees, and it is their custom to look to the Pleiades to pray. The Pleiades star system is also prominent in one of the most treasured and famous Cherokee prophecies, the prophecy of the rattlesnake, a sign in the heavens that is evolving toward the end of the Cherokee calendar in the year 2012. Needless to say, it's no coincidence that the Cherokee and Mayan calendars end in the same year. It's simply the result of the northern migration of the Mayans and the Aztecs from Central and South America to settle in the United States. But the heart of the prophecy of the rattlesnake is rooted in the wisdom and teachings of the ancient Cherokee elders. Just as all cultures interpret the stars and their movement into zodiac systems and prophecies, the Cherokee see a zodiac of their own, ancient and cherished, the story of eternity, or time on time, written across the face of the universe. The universe itself is made of crystal, and 4 rawhide ropes hang from it to suspend the great island known as Earth. While the outline of the heavens retains its shape in the sky, there is movement within the Cherokee zodiac that makes it seem alive, breathing and transforming itself to foretell the fate of Earth against the backdrop of the eternal cycle of life. There are 13 constellations in the Cherokee zodiac, most of them designs of animals. And prominent among them is the constellation Rattlesnake, in which a prophecy is written. The rattlesnake has a head, and the tip of its tail is the revered Pleiades system. Between the head and the tail is a body that twists and slithers in a kind of sidewinding movement. There are 52 scales on its mouth, the number 52 being an essential part of the very sophisticated Cherokee calendar. The outline of the rattlesnake remains stationary, but various forms and shapes that appear and disappear on the snake itself are read as signs of the past, present, and future of the universe. From July 16 to 22, 1994, astronomers around the world were mesmerized as more than 20 fragments of a comet called Shoemaker-Levy 9 collided with the planet Jupiter's southern hemisphere, a phenomenon predicted in the Cherokee calendar. In their mythology, these comet fragments were actually an attack on Jupiter by the fingers of a fearsome, bloodthirsty witch named Spearfinger. Spearfinger was 40 feet tall, had skin made of stone that no weapon could penetrate, and brandished a long, razor-sharp finger with which she could stab her victims in the back, remove their livers without leaving a single mark, and eat them in one gulp. Whether it was a fragmented comet crashing into Jupiter or a cruel assault by Spearfinger, this spectacle was considered to be a sign for the Cherokee nation to wake up from its complacency and become vigilant. This collision with Jupiter was also prophesied to wake Orion, the celestial hunter, who would resume his pursuit of the maidens of the Pleiades, while Jupiter and Venus would do battle against each other, signaling the time of the Cherokee UKUs, or high priests. In the years 2004 through 2012, a phenomenon is foreseen in the heavens in which feathers will appear on the head of the rattlesnake. Its glowing eyes will open. It will grow wings, hands, and arms, and its hands will hold a bowl of blood. The 7 rattles of its tail will resemble the roots of a tree, the Pleiades tree of the beginning. This will correspond to the transit of Venus, a very rare alignment of Earth, Venus, and the Sun in which it appears from Earth as if Venus is crossing the face of the Sun. A Venus transit occurred on June 8, 2004, and astronomers predict it will happen again on June 5 to 6, 2012. And it's in the year 2012 that the Cherokee calendar, like the Mayan calendar, comes to an end. To some ancient Indian civilizations of South America, the end marks the coming of Quetzalcoatl, the god of creation, often depicted as a feathered serpent much like the feathered rattlesnake the Cherokee watch for in the night sky as a sign that the end is near. To the Cherokee, the end in the year 2012 signifies that all will be reborn. The Sioux Nation and the White Buffalo Woman. To the Sioux, there is no more sacred living thing than a white buffalo. On the rare occasions when a white buffalo calf is born, most recently in 1994, 1996, and 2005, Native Americans from throughout the North American continent make pilgrimages to pay homage to what they consider to be a newborn sign of hope and healing and fulfilled prophecies. For us, they've said, this would be something like coming to see Jesus lying in the manger. The legend of the White Buffalo Woman is a beautiful and significant cornerstone of the Sioux heritage itself. Crow Dog, a Sioux medicine man, described her importance by saying, "Before she came, people didn't know how to live. They knew nothing. The Buffalo Woman put her sacred mind into their minds." The story has passed from one Sioux generation to the next through their elders and medicine men for countless hundreds of years, expressing the deeply spiritual nature of a traditionally warrior tribe and their prophecies for the earth and all its people. Legend has it that one summer, longer ago than anyone can trace, the sacred council of the Sioux Nation, called the Osity Shakoan, gathered to camp together out of concern for their people. Despite a steady bright sun, there was no game for the braves to hunt, and people throughout the land were starving. Each day the council sent out scouts to search for game animals, but none could be found. Among the assembled council was Chief Standing Hollow Horn, in his own camp circle with his tribe, the Without Bows, or Itazipcho. One morning as dawn broke, Standing Hollow Horn dispatched 2 of his young braves to hunt. The Sioux had no horses, so the 2 braves proceeded on foot, and after finding nothing in the surrounding area, they decided to climb a high hill nearby for a better view of the vast countryside. As they scaled the green hill, they noticed a figure moving toward them from very far away. Because it seemed to be floating rather than walking, they were sure a holy person was approaching them. The closer it came, the more clearly they could see that the small form was a radiantly beautiful woman. Her dark eyes seemed electrified with power. Her long black hair cascaded freely down her back, with the exception of a single strand tied gracefully back with buffalo fur. Circles of red were painted onto her cheekbones, dramatically contrasting with her translucent brown skin. Her gleaming white buckskin clothing was embroidered with sacred designs in colors that were unearthly in their intensity. She carried a large bundle in her hands. The 2 braves stared at her, transfixed. Then one of them, overwhelmed by her beauty and wanting to possess her, reached to touch her. But she was far too sacred to tolerate being an object of earthly desire, and the young impulsive man was suddenly consumed by a black fiery cloud and reduced to nothing but a pile of incinerated bones. The other scout remained silent, in pure respectful awe, as the White Buffalo Woman turned her dark eyes to him and said, "I bring your people a message from the Buffalo Nation, along with sacred gifts for this difficult time. Return to your camp and help prepare for my arrival. Your chief should construct a medicine lodge, supported by 24 poles, and make it holy to receive me." The young brave hurried back to Chief Standing Hollow Horn and the others at the camp circle, breathlessly repeating the instructions of the White Buffalo Woman. Excited, they built the medicine lodge with 24 poles for support, performed rituals to sanctify it, and then waited eagerly for the most reverent arrival. 4 days later they saw the sun glinting off of the radiant white dress of a small approaching form, and before long they found themselves in the divine presence of the white buffalo woman. They respectfully bowed their heads as Chief Standing Hollowhorn stepped forward to greet her, his voice hushed with awe. "Sister," he said, "we are honored that you have come to help us." She motioned for them to follow her into the medicine lodge and taught them to build a sacred altar of earth in the center of the circle of 24 poles. At her direction they smoothed the red earth of the altar, in which she traced a holy emblem. She then stood before the chief and opened the bundle she'd brought with her. She reached into it and withdrew a sacred pipe, called a chananpsa, which she held out to the gathered crowd. Its stem was in her right hand. Its bowl was in her left. The chananpsa has been held in that exact way by the Sioux people since that day. The white buffalo woman filled the bowl of the pipe with tobacco made of bark and walked around the medicine lodge 4 times, representing the sacred circle that does not end, like the path of the great sun. Next she lit the pipe with a dry buffalo chip she ignited from the altar fire, creating the flame that does not end, known as Pitaowaihanka Shinai, which would forever be passed on from one Sioux generation to the next. Again she held the pipe toward the gathered crowd. "This holy pipe," she told them, "holds all of us together, the sacred beneath and the sacred above. As your feet stand planted in the earth and the stem of the pipe reaches toward the sky, you become a living prayer, a bridge that joins the earth, the sky, and all living things, with 2 legs and 4, with wings and with no limbs at all, as well as the trees, the wild flowers, and the grasses that bend in the moving spirit of the wind. All are related. All are one family, joined together in the form of this pipe. The stone of its bowl is both the buffalo and the flesh and blood of the red man. The buffalo stands on 4 legs, honoring the 4 directions of the universe and the 4 ages of man. He was created in the west to hold back the waters when the Great Spirit made the world. Each year he loses a hair. In each of the 4 ages he loses a leg. The sacred circle will be done when the hair and legs of the buffalo are gone and he can no longer stop the waters from covering the earth. She then presented the pipe to Chief Standing Hollowhorn and said, "Respect this sacred pipe and it will see you safely to the end of the road. I shall come back to see you once in every generation." With that she left the camp in the same direction from which she had come. The chief and his people watched in reverence as she floated toward the setting sun. Suddenly, some distance away, they saw her stop and roll over, turning into a black buffalo. She rolled over a second time and became a brown buffalo. Rolling over again, she changed to a red buffalo. The 4th time, she rolled over and was transformed into a beautiful white buffalo calf before she disappeared beyond the horizon. The moment she had vanished, great herds of buffalo miraculously appeared, sacrificing themselves to the Sioux hunters so that the people would be nourished and survive. From that day forward, the buffalo, beloved kin of the Sioux nation, provided all that was needed, from the meat to feed them to the skins to clothe and house them to the bones from which tools could be made. Many Native American tribes embrace and revere a list of sacred instructions given to them by the Great Spirit at the time of creation. It's their belief that following these instructions can perpetuate the sacred hoop, the Creator's intended cycle of life, that will end only if we allow it. This list is so eloquently simple that I can't help but think shame on any of us who can't be bothered to follow these instructions, no matter what our culture or religion, because there's so little to ask in exchange for the possibility of saving our Earth. Take care of Mother Earth and the other colors of man. Respect Mother Earth and creation. Honor all life, and support that honor. Be grateful from the heart for all life. It is through life that there is survival. Thank the Creator at all times for all life. Love, and express that love. Be humble. Humility is the gift of wisdom and understanding. Be kind with oneself and with others. Share feelings and personal concerns and commitments. Be honest with oneself and with others. Be responsible for these sacred instructions and share them with other nations. The Aborigines of Australia are believed to have been on this earth for more than 18,000 generations. They've been nomadic hunters and gatherers since their ancient beginnings, traveling and living in clans, orally passing along their culture, traditions, and beliefs to their progeny. The Aborigines revere nature. They revere their elders and their ancestors. They're deeply committed to maintaining a balance between the practical and the spiritual aspects of their lives. And they embrace a gorgeous mythology called the Dreamtime, which lies at the heart of their faith. The Dreamtime, woven through their lives in the most sacred and the most mundane ways, is at its core that time of creation when the Aborigines' spirit ancestors moved through bare, unsanctified land and gave it its physical form and its sacred laws. There was the Rainbow Serpent, who slithered across the earth forming rivers and valleys with its massive body. There was Bila, the Sun Woman, whose fire lit the world. There were Kudna and Muda, two lizard-like creatures who destroyed Bila. They were then so frightened by the darkness they'd created by killing the Sun Woman that they began hurling boomerangs into the sky in all directions, trying to bring back the light. Kudna's boomerang flew into the eastern sky and a brilliant ball of fire appeared. The ball of fire slowly crossed the sky and vanished again beyond the western horizon, and day and night were born. The countless spirits and stories of the Aborigines' mythology form the exquisite foundation on which this ancient civilization built its reverence for all of nature and their belief that it is humankind's privilege to live among and serve such hallowed creations. Dreamtime is a reality of the Aborigines' past, present, and future. It isn't something that happened and was completed a very long time ago. It's a continuing consciousness and responsibility, with tragic consequences if it's ignored. A prophecy from an Australian Aborigine tribal elder named Gubbo Ted Thomas, orally preserved until it was finally committed to writing, reflects their profoundly simple faith and their vision of the end of days. I was in Dreamtime. I see this great wave going. I tell people about this wave. It wasn't a tidal wave. This was a spiritual wave. So, to me, I believe that the Dreamtime is going to be that. I believe the revival is going to start in Australia when we're dreaming. It's the humming bee that I'm talking about. And love. We've got to learn to love one another. You see, that's really what's going to happen to the earth. We're going to have tidal waves. We're going to have earthquakes. That's coming because we don't consider this land as our mother. We've taken away the balance, and we're not putting back. I look at the bush, and those trees are alive. They're not dead, they're alive. And they want you to cuddle them. Norse mythology. There are few more colorful and more intricate doomsday visions than the Norse mythology of the end of the universe, or Ragnarok, which means doom of the gods. Norse mythology had its origins in the pre-Christian Northern Germanic, European, and Anglo-Saxon beliefs of Scandinavia. And when it came to Ragnarok, the doom in Doomsday was an understatement. First, the legend goes, Fimbulveter arrives, a 3-year non-stop blast of the most brutal winter imaginable. During Fimbulveter, probably because of their relentless misery, people begin feuding and fighting with each other and abandoning any semblance of morality. It's the first sign that the end is on its way. Next, a wolf arrives. The wolf's name is Skull, and upon his arrival he devours the sun. His brother Hatai promptly eats the moon, and the whole world is plunged into darkness. 3 cocks crow, summoning the gods and the earth's giants and even waking the dead. The earth begins rumbling with massive earthquakes, toppling mountains, and freeing a ship of the dead from the bowels of hell, with Loki at its helm, his son Fenrir, another wolf with a massive mouth, at his side. The sea roils violently, and Hormungand, a colossal, venomous serpent, writhes enraged as he heads toward the Norwegian battleground called Vigrid, where the final war on Earth will be fought by the gathering combatants. Hormungand poisons the sea, the land, and the sky with his venom, and he makes his way to Vigrid. The tsunami waves of the sea liberate the ship Naglfar far from its moorings, and, commanded by the giant Hymir, the vessel full of giants sails toward the battlefield. From the south comes another army of giants, led by Surt the fire giant, who carries a sword hotter than the sun that scorches everything in his path as he and his legions march to Vigrid. Heimdall, the Viking god of light, sees the warriors approaching from all directions and sounds his horn to summon the gods. Odin, the supreme Norse deity, Thor, the god of thunder, Odin's sons, and the other heroic gods of the heavens arrive on the battlefield in golden armor, riding magnificent white steeds. The assembly continues until all the gods, giants, and demons have arrived for mortal combat on the massive, doomed Norwegian expanse. Odin and Fenrir instantly attack each other, a fight that continues for a very long time. Thor attacks Hormungand, the venomous serpent, and kills him. But the serpent's poison slowly and very surely kills Thor. Surt the fire giant finds the unarmed god of sun and rain, Freyr, and quickly destroys him. Tyr, the one-handed god of heroic glory, does battle with the monstrous hound Garm, who guards the entrance to the underworld. They both die in combat. Loki and Heimdall, mortal enemies for as long as anyone can remember, square off, and neither survives. Finally, the battle between Odin and Fenrir ends, with the vicious wolf managing to seize and swallow Odin. Enraged, Odin's son Vidar kills Fenrir with his bare hands. Surt, in a final insane explosion of violence, begins hurling fire all around him until the entire world is burning and anyone still living dies in the flames. And all the land on earth sinks into the sea. But that's not quite the end. There's a very special tree in heaven, the World Tree, or Yggdrasil. This tree possesses the essence of every living thing that ever was and ever will be on earth. And while the world was being destroyed, 2 people, Lif and Lifthrasir, managed to survive by hiding in the welcoming branches of Yggdrasil. A few of the gods survive as well, including Odin's brother and sons and Thor's sons. So that when a beautiful, cleansed new world rises from the sea, and the sun and moon are reborn, Lifthrasir, and the surviving gods are there to welcome it and happily take up residence there. This new world, devoid of evil and thriving in peaceful harmony, is gradually repopulated with Lif and Lifthrasir's descendants. As for the inhabitants of the previous world, who either died in Surt's fire or drowned as countries and continents sank, their souls never ceased to exist. They might be living among the gods in Grimli, or in the splendor of Brimir, if they were good people during their lifetimes. If they weren't, they'll be exiled to Nastrand, a hideous nightmare of a dungeon, the walls and roofs of which are made entirely of live, very poisonous snakes. I have to admit, I chuckled more than once about the preposterous series of events the Norse came up with to describe the end of the world. Then I remembered what I was taught about the apocalypse in Catholic school and wondered if the Norse might have chuckled a little themselves at stories about locusts wearing crowns, pouring out of a bottomless pit to torture anyone who didn't have the sign of God on their forehead. Suddenly I didn't feel I had as much room to laugh about giant tsunami-causing snakes, and wolves that could eat the sun, and I realized we humans always have been and always will be just trying to piece together the unknowable as best we can.